They say language divides us. What if technology could bridge every gap in an instant? Imagine speaking with someone halfway around the world as easily as texting a friend next door. Today's AI doesn't just translate words, it captures tone, context, even cultural nuance. Get ready to see how the rise of multilingual AI is reshaping global communication forever. For a long time, language was geography. Where you were born, the tongue you spoke, determined who you could do business with, learn from, or collaborate with. There were over 7,000 languages on earth, and if you didn't speak the right one, your world stayed small. Then came the first wave of machine translation. Clunky tools that could barely turn a menu into something readable. People joked about the gibberish. No one relied on it for anything serious. But something changed in the last few years. What used to be a novelty is now quietly transforming diplomacy, commerce, education, and culture. And it's doing it fast. The rise of large language models wasn't just about smarter AI, it was about scalable understanding. These models didn't just memorize vocabulary, they learned patterns, tone, meaning, and then they were trained not just in English, but in dozens of languages simultaneously. Models like Meta's seamless M4T and Google's Palm now speak, listen, and even generate speech in multiple languages without needing to go through English as a bridge. That's a huge shift. It means the AI isn't thinking in English and converting, it is thinking multilingually, almost natively. That's already having major consequences. Think about YouTube creators in Indonesia reaching fans in Brazil, or customer support teams in Mexico helping users in South Korea without hiring massive multilingual teams. It used to take entire localization departments to manage global outreach. You can now plug a multilingual AI into your workflow, and suddenly your content exists in 10 languages at once, with tone, with emotion, with context preserved. But this isn't just about convenience, it's about access. Millions of people have been left out of digital revolution because they don't speak one of the dominant internet languages. In India, for example, English and Hindi dominate online, but hundreds of millions of speakers use Tamil, Bengali, Marathi, Telugu, and other languages as their primary voice. The newer AI systems are starting to listen. They are being trained on diverse datasets, sometimes scraped from radio broadcast, regional news, literature, or even subtitles. That means they are getting better at understanding not just words, but the rhythm and style of how different cultures actually speak. This also changes who gets to participate in the global economy. A small business in Vietnam that once had no chance of selling abroad can now market products in German or Arabic or Spanish without hiring a team of translators or consultants. The AI translates product descriptions, ads, and customer interactions in real time. It removes the friction, and removing friction is how revolutions begin. What's remarkable is how invisible the tech is becoming. A decade ago, if you were using a translation app, it was obvious. There was a lag, there were weird pauses. Now, with systems like Whisper, NLLB, or DeepL's newest generation, translations happen almost instantly and they feel human. You could be watching a live stream in Chinese and hearing an English voiceover that feels like it's part of the original content. That's not just efficiency, that's immersion. Of course, there are challenges. Accuracy is still an issue, especially in languages with fewer data sources. Bias creeps in. Sarcasm, idioms, regional slang, these are all still tricky, but the direction of travel is clear. AI is learning faster than ever, and the people building these models are no longer just based in Silicon Valley. There are open source multilingual projects coming out of Nairobi, Jakarta, Sao Paulo. This is global infrastructure being built by a global crowd. This shift could also change diplomacy and disaster response. Imagine a world where aid workers can speak instantly with locals during a flood in Mozambique, or where a UN peacekeeper can diffuse a tense moment in the Democratic Republic of Congo because their AI assistant speaks Lingala natively and understands what not to say. These aren't far future scenarios. Pilots for real time multilingual communication are already being deployed in conflict zones and regional camps. Pilots for real time multilingual communication are already being deployed in conflict zones and refugee camps. The rise of multilingual AI is doing something subtle but powerful. It's flattening the communication hierarchy. For the first time in history, fluency might no longer be a gatekeeper. That changes education, that changes governance, that changes whose story gets heard and who gets to tell it in their own words. When people talk about AI's impact, they often talk about automation, job losses, and synthetic content. But there is a quite a revolution happening in the background. The machines are finally starting to listen. And more importantly, they are learning to understand. Let's talk about what this means in practice, because it's one thing to say AI is multilingual, but what does it actually enable that wasn't possible before? Start with diplomacy. For decades, international negotiations have been a dance of translators and interpreters. Every statement runs through multiple people before it lands. That introduces lag, and worse, it introduces distortion. Intent gets lost in subtle differences of phrasing. In high stakes talks, that kind of misfire can collapse an agreement. Now imagine a multilingual AI assistant listening to a live negotiation, translating in real time, and flagging terms that might have different cultural implications. That's not just helpful. That's strategic. It's not just global elites talking to each other. Local voices now have a channel to speak up and be understood. Indigenous communities often locked out of national discourse because their language is too niche for translation budgets or suddenly being looped in. A citizen journalist in rural Colombia can broadcast in Vayu and have her report accessible in English, French, or Arabic within minutes. That changes who gets to frame the story. Now let's zoom into everyday life. Customer support is being rebuilt from the ground up. Say you are a parent in Egypt trying to troubleshoot your child's new learning app, but all the help documentation is in English or French. Instead of struggling through a third language, you now get a live voice assistant that answers you in Arabic, even Egyptian dialect natural flow. The backend might still be in English, but the user experience feels local. That builds trust, that keeps user engaged, and that's already being piloted by startups in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Another area being transformed is education. For years, the internet promised open access to learning, but let's be real, most of that content was in English, maybe Chinese. If you didn't speak those, you were out of luck. Even translated subtitles were awkward or late. Now, AI is changing the default. Platforms are beginning to offer course content where the lectures, readings, and discussions are instantly available in multiple languages. And this isn't mechanical voice dubbing. With voice cloning and real time translation, the instructor's voice and intonation remain the same, just speaking your language. That preserves the emotional tone of teaching, which matters more than people think. It also helps with literacy itself. Many communities have oral traditions where reading and writing aren't as common, but spoken language is rich and nuanced. AI tools are being trained not just to translate text, but to work across modalities. A person can speak in their native tongue, get a translated visual explanation, and respond with a voice command. Suddenly, the digital world becomes interactive. That's huge for learners who have been underserved for decades. Here is another shift: entertainment. Content creators used to have two choices: either limit their reach to a single language or spend big on localization. Now, a creator in Nairobi can record a podcast in Swahili and it gets auto dubbed into Italian, Turkish, and Korean with emotional tone preserved. It's not just translating words, it's translating performance. That expands audience. It builds global fandoms around local voices. And this isn't theoretical. Look at what happened with Korean dramas and Latin music. Language was a barrier at first, but subtitles and dubbed versions cracked it open. Now, with AI, that barrier isn't just lowered, it's being erased in real time. But there is another layer to this. AI doesn't just translate what we say, it can shape how we say it. Real time tools are being built to suggest culturally appropriate phrasing. Say you are negotiating a business deal across cultures. The AI assistant might nudge you. This expression might sound aggressive in Japanese. Try this softer version. That kind of invisible coaching can diffuse tension, build relationships, and avoid misunderstandings before they happen. It's more than translation, it's situational fluency. And all of this works in reverse too. If you are learning a new language, AI isn't just a tutor, it's a partner. It gives real feedback, detects hesitation, accents, awkward phrasing, and helps you practice like you are actually speaking with a native speaker. It listens patiently, it doesn't judge. That psychological comfort changes how fast people learn, especially adults, especially people who have been told they are too late to pick up a new language. But let's be clear, this isn't a utopia. It's still uneven. The AI is much better in languages that have more data. English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, languages with fewer written resources or complex grammatical structures still lag. Indigenous and endangered languages are often absent entirely, but the potential is there, and communities are taking things into their own hands, feeding local texts, songs, conversations, and stories into open source models to preserve and empower their language digitally. That's the hidden impact of this revolution. It's not just about giving people access to more content, it's about giving them control over how they represent themselves in the global conversation. For centuries, global voices were filtered through colonial, political, or commercial lenses. Now, with multilingual AI, the filters are starting to crack. People are speaking for themselves, and the world is starting to listen. The next phase of multilingual AI isn't just about speech to text or real time subtitles. It's about building systems that actually think in multiple languages. Until now, translation was a reactive tool. You write something and the AI converts it. But the future is proactive. AI will start generating content with a global audience in mind from the start, not just localizing it later. That means understanding cultural nuance before it even shows up on the screen. It means tailoring not just words, but tone, structure, even the metaphorical language to fit the world view of different listeners. This is already happening. In customer engagement platforms, AI generated ads aren't just being translated, they are being rewritten for different regions. A phrase that plays well in the US might fall flat in Japan or come across as rude in Germany. The AI knows that. It adjusts. In diplomacy, we are seeing tools that propose different framings for policy statements depending on the target audience. One sentence, three different versions, each carrying the same intent but shaped for local resonance. That's what true multilingual intelligence looks like. Not just bilingual, not even trilingual, but culturally aware. There is also a radical shift happening in voice technology. We are moving beyond robotic voices. New models can preserve a person's vocal identity while switching languages. You can record a video in Hindi, and AI can replicate your voice perfectly in French, Spanish, and Swahili. Same tone, same pacing, same style. It still sounds like you. That changes how authenticity travels across borders. It means you don't have to disappear behind a generic narrator to go global. Your voice, your energy, your delivery kept intact. That builds trust with audiences who don't speak your language but now feel like they are in the room with you. This also matters for inclusion. Think about accessibility. Deaf communities benefit when spoken content is transcribed and translated into sign language equivalents using AI avatars. People with reading disabilities can access content through intelligent voice narration that adapts to their pace and preference. AI is starting to bridge not just language divides, but communication divides in every form. And this, more than anything, is what makes it revolutionary. It's not about just talking to someone far away, it's about understanding someone who communicates differently than you do because of language, ability, or culture. What's even more transformative is what this does to collective knowledge. For centuries, knowledge production was dominated by a few languages. Think of how many scientific papers are published in English. Now imagine if those insights could instantly be rendered into 50 languages with no loss of precision. And not just the language, but the technical terms, the logic, the way of thinking. And this opens the floodgates. Suddenly, a researcher in Senegal reading a physics paper from Brazil doesn't need an English middleman. A midwife in a rural clinic can read best practices from Taiwan. Information flow becomes literal, not top down. That changes the balance of knowledge. But we should also talk about risk. Multilingual AI can spread misinformation just as fast as truth. A viral video with false claims can now be dubbed into dozens of languages, giving it global reach instantly. Hate speech, propaganda, scam content, they don't need human translators anymore. AI gives them scale. That's why there is a growing push for multilingual content verification systems, ethics frameworks, and trust layers built into the tech. It's not just about building smarter AI, it's about building responsible AI that knows the weight of the words it carries. The bigger question, though, is philosophical. When AI becomes the primary interpreter between people, what happens to language itself? Will we slowly drift into simplified global dialects? Will languages with fewer speakers fade faster because AI can cover them? Or will this new era protect those voices by giving them digital permanence? We don't have the answers yet, but we do know this. Language is culture, it's identity. If AI systems are going to carry our voices, they need to do more than match words. They need to carry meaning, respect, intention. And that's why the rise of multilingual AI isn't just a tech story, it's a human story. It's about giving people the power to be heard and to listen without filters or barriers. It's about building bridges where walls stood for centuries. It's not perfect, it's not finished, but for the first time in history, we have a tool that could make the world truly conversational, not just connected, not just online, but understood. And that might be the most powerful form of communication we have ever created. So, here we are. The future speaks every language. The only question left is, are we ready to listen? Thanks for watching.